Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into another episode of The Lager Line, served to you by Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing, with support from Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets, because that's what we do here, for better or for worse. Lately, for worse, we talk about the Houston Rockets, and that's what we're going to be doing today, talking about the team 2-12 entering Wednesday that currently has the worst record in the NBA. I am Ben DuBose, your host. As always, I'm joined by our other co-host, Paulo Alves. Paulo, is the Astros championship high coming down any after watching the Rockets the last few games more intently?
And it is, and I'm happy that it is. During a little bit there, it was tough to actually enjoy watching the Rockets because we were kind of spoiled by the Astros being so good. But, that's digested. I've grown more and more excited to just watch this team play because, we were never expected to be good. So gotta, when you're a rebuilding team, gotta go look specifically for things to be happy about rather than just, look at the win-loss total.
Fair enough. It's all about the bigger picture and having that rebuilding lens and understanding the context of what you're trying to do. And if we need it, we can always just pop up Astros Phillies Game 6 on YouTube if we need to pick me up in terms of wins and losses. Anyway, today, to help us break down how the rebuild is going through the first 14 games of the season, we've got a special guest. His name is Mark Schindler. If you don't follow him already on Twitter, you can do so at MG_Schindler. You can also read his work in Dime, where he covers the NBA as a whole with a particular emphasis on draft and scouting. He also covers the WNBA. Very, very insightful guy when it comes to, again, the draft and scouting sides of the business. Mark, thanks for taking the time to join us. How are you?
I'm good. I appreciate you guys having me. It's psyched to be on. Paulo, I know we've talked mutually for forever, so it's dope to finally meet. I'm excited. I feel like there's a lot of stuff to dive into with the Rockets. That's not necessarily all negative too, from what some of the perspectives might be. But yeah, this is it's been a season to start for the start, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, I'll start you with a bigger picture topic because I think you see it through a different lens than those of us that are Rockets diehards that are just so laser focused on this particular team. I know you focus on the league as a whole, and you especially look at some of these younger teams that have some of these recently drafted high picks from the 2021 and 2022 classes. So when you look at where Houston is at, 2-12, and you look at Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun year 2, Jabari Smith, Tari, Eason year 1, how alarming or not alarming is their sluggish start when you compare it to, I suppose, other teams that are at similar points in their rebuilding cycle?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of the way to word it, because on one hand it's tough because of how many guys they just drafted this year, and obviously last year as well. Like overall, like this team is just young. I think they have one guy who's over 25, if I remember correctly. I mean two, because Boban as well. But yeah, Boban
but he's not in the rotation.
Exactly. It's like, you prove the point. Exactly. Like, this is just an extremely, extremely young team, young in terms of actual age, and then young just in terms of court time. Like, there's not a lot of game reps on this team, and I think that really shows. So I think you have to obviously weigh that in. But where I do struggle most with this team is just trying to figure out what the clear identity is. Like, I don't know if you guys kind of feel the same, but for me, like, I mean, I do actually think we saw some really positive things in the Clippers game, even though that was a loss. But overall, I just kind of continue to come away with, I really wish that there was just something more set in stone here. Not that it has to be, like, I have my quibbles with how OKC has done things. But you can point to OKC and, like, very directly say, like, okay, they have an identity with what they're trying to do. And it's different, too. Like, they have Shea's, like, he's taken a leap to being in the upper stratosphere of stardom this year. And I think Jalen gets to that point eventually, but that's still a little ways off. Like, Shea's a lot farther ahead in development. So again, you don't want to compare it 1-to-1, but like, it's more so like they have the entire defensive infrastructure there, and that's how they I mean, that they are good at holding their players accountable. If you don't play good defense or at least try on defense, you're getting axed out of the rotation for a game. I think those are things that I would. Those are things that I think I tend to see more, or wish that I could see more with Houston. Just like a more concrete direction on what they're trying to do, because they're very talented. Like I would say, like just up and down with this roster. There's not a guy on this roster that I dislike. Like I think you can look at every single guy and have real interest in who they could be in the league. Obviously, it's to varying degrees, but it always just comes down to like how does this actually fit together? And part of being a young team is figuring that out. But also, like I do think that there are real hindrances right now to all the guys actually finding ways to work in synergy.
Yeah, I think what you say makes sense, and a lot of people on Rockets Twitter have said that, over the past couple of years about just having an identity, like what's this team's bread and butter, and part of it has to be because the team has changed, right, dramatically from year 1 to year 2, but then from year 2 to year 3, when you look at this team, you lost Christian Wood, which is it was a pretty important part of the rotation in how they played. But you basically are only implementing Tari, Eason, and Jabari Smith into the rotation. And those are two guys that, they shouldn't dramatically change how you're playing basketball. They're essentially early on in their careers, they're essentially 3-and-D wings. And so what a lot of people point to, and there's a little bit of a debate on Rockets Twitter about it, is there's people who think it's mostly Silas and him not coaching these guys, him not calling enough plays, him not prioritizing who needs to be prioritized, some mind-boggling rotation decisions. And then there's the people that mostly blame KPJ as the lead ball handler of this team and say, hey, this guy's not a point guard, we're forcing him to play point guard. And, it's not working, and that's why the offense doesn't make sense a ton of the time. Where do you sit there when you watch this team? Do you think it's a little bit of a talent problem, or is it more of a, maybe they should be a little bit more structured and it's more on the coach?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Like to me, I think that the KPJ discourse gets a little overwrought for me. Like he's not perfect for sure. Like I think ideally is he really ball handler? No, but also he does do a lot of positive things, even if it's not always directly correlative with winning right now. I think, like, again, though, part of it is just what the roster is. Like when I see what this roster is right now, like even if, like, again, like you don't really want Kevin having to carry the load as like your lead point guard, but at the same time too, like what's difficult overall is just like when you're looking at the infrastructure, okay, who is really like a plus playmaker on this team? Like, I mean, Kevin can make some okay passes and reads, but I would not call him a plus playmaker at his position right now. Jalen is very much a work in progress. I think he's trying to figure some things out. Eric Gordon, yes, he averages 3 assists per game. I would not really call him a plus decision maker at his position. Like, and then you're looking up and down the roster too, like, okay, Jabari, Tari, like all guys who I think need time to really figure that aspect out. Like Usman is a solid playmaker, but nobody's ever going to guard him. Like maybe Bruno Fernando. Like I think, to be honest, like I posited this like on Twitter probably like a week ago. I was like, this team like really misses Bruno Fernando, and it's not that I think he's better than Sengun or anything. Like we'll get into Sengun too, I'm sure, but like just having a player who makes really quick decisions without, having to really think about it and without also needing to hold the ball, I think is really huge and something this team misses. Like I took a screenshot of a game I was watching yesterday, and I think on the floor, I want to say I think it was like Jagup, Tari, KJ, and I think Usman and like Dacian Nix or something. And I was like, there's one plus playmaker on the floor right now. And like, even then, like KJ's playing more of the 3 this year. So I wouldn't necessarily call him as much of a plus playmaker because he's more, at the 4, I think, where he makes things work better. But I think you just see like a lot of the collective struggles of having a lot of guys who are still figuring out the decision-making aspects of the game. So the overlap, again, is just like really tough because with Sengun, like, he's made real strides this year. Like the scoring has been very legit. I do think he's a good passer. I don't know quite to. I think figuring out the degree to which that's at is stuff that I really want to see, because he does really good things with the ball in his hands. But he, like, again, like he's somebody who definitely needs to hold the ball a little bit longer. It's not necessarily the quick decision making. He can telegraph some passes, and again, that's part of being a young player. But it's just like, I think it's, to answer your question, I feel like it's a culmination of everything, because I don't love the sets that they run, but also the personnel isn't exactly inspiring to run a lot more stuff. Like, I do think one of the worst things this year has been Jabari's utilization. Like, on one hand, like, you have to hit your shots. He's been in a shooting slump. I don't think I'm worried about it, like some people seem to be, but they also don't really do a lot that inspires me in terms of how they're using him. Like, he never really just feels like he finds an ability to get in rhythm. All of his shots are coming out of, being outside the play for the most part. And that's just very much the opposite of how he was at Auburn. And I think he's somebody who I want to see getting more scripted touches, even if it, again, like, I don't think that's going to be conducive to winning right now, but like, for his actual development, it's the kind of stuff that you can see. I know I'm kind of rambling, but like, there's so many things going on with this roster that are just like mind-boggling. And I think for any coach, really, this is a really difficult job.
You mentioned them not having Bruno Fernando, and obviously that's a small thing in the grand scheme, but it certainly doesn't help. Another guy they've only had for basically 2 games is Jae'Sean Tate. And at today's practice at Toyota Center, I thought it was interesting. Kevin Porter Jr. said that Tate is probably the second most important asset in their organization. And I think he was referring to, obviously, Jalen at the top of that list. But that's pretty high praise for a guy who is known primarily as a defender, but he is an underrated passer, can be a facilitator. Would he help some of these issues if and when he gets back in a couple of weeks? And then the other thing that goes with that, if he does rejoin the rotation and helps you playing 25, 30 minutes a night, who can they take out? It's one of those things to me where they may have to look at Eric Gordon trades, if for no other reason than if Jae'Sean Tate comes back and is a difference maker and plays 25 or 30 minutes, then you're really going to have to subtract minutes from one of those young guys that you're trying to develop, unless I guess you can free up those Eric Gordon minutes. That's the only conclusion that I can draw.
Yeah, I think that's tough too, because especially like where Jae'Sean's passing comes from is what makes it difficult too, because I'd have to like run the numbers on what his court time with Sengun is like, because I hadn't thought about it until right now, but like Jae'Sean is really at his best when he can create out of the post. Like, I feel like that's when we saw him at his best 2 years ago, when he was just like allowed to kind of go try and bully people on the block and draw to, or just make those cross court whips that he really likes. Like, he's not a good enough ball handler to run pick and roll. Like, I mean, he can, right, but again, like it's going to be an automatic under because he's not a shooter like that. And he does good things in transition too. So, but again, like that makes it harder because it's not like your traditional playmaking. I would be really interested, like, okay, if you're running a smaller lineup or something, maybe you try using him as a short roll threat and things like that. Especially, I feel like Bruno's thing is still like kind of TBD on what's up with him, at least last time that I saw stuff from Jonathan Fagan. But yeah, I mean, especially with only having like one real true big, unless Usman's getting minutes, like, I think you could test that out with Jae'Sean, because that stuff's, it's worth trying. It's interesting. It gives them another look. But exactly like you're saying, like, who do you take out of the rotation? And to me, honestly, like, I feel like this team kind of has to make a consolidation trade. Not that that's like saying that they're like giving up on guys, but I do think like it's at the point where it's like, how do you actually play everyone and make it work and make it conducive to making guys better? Because at some point you do kind of have to cordon off a little bit, like, to get the absolute most out of Jalen, which I think that is, that's the goal. Regardless of what people think or say, like, to me, Jalen, like, I think Jalen's a guy who ends up as the leading scorer on a very damn good team. Like, he's 20 years old. I can't really debate what he's going to be in 5 years, but the skill set that he has now and what it could be, like, and the growth that he's already shown, like, especially back into last year, I think he really showed a lot growing as a pick and roll playmaker and just decision maker overall. And he still has to figure out things as a finisher, but that's more stuff that I think physically he needs to figure out as he gets stronger. But Yeah, like I mean, everything should be about Jalen and Jabari right now and getting the most out of those two guys.
Yeah, and touching on Jabari, right? He is someone who, coming out of college, anybody that looked at him in college thought, hey, this is a guy that, at least early on in his career, he's going to, provide some defense. He's going to be a really good shooter. And right now, the shot isn't there.
Mhm.
And it really seems like it's mental, at least from when I watch him. It seems like it's mental because his shot. If you look at like a lot of his shots in a row without being in game, without it being actually in the game, because it's hard to memorize how it looks. The
Yeah.
shot looks to have different paces basically every single time, and I feel like that's something that will come with more NBA games, and he'll be used to, oh, when I need to rush my shot when I don't. Um, he actually got blocked on a three, which I thought was crazy a couple of games ago. But you brought up you weren't inspired about how he's being used, and Stephen Silas actually had a quote on this, which was somewhat, which set the alarms off on Rockets Twitter. He said that what's stopping them from running pick and pop with Jabari was that defenses would just switch. And I've only watched basketball for 6 years now, but I thought defenses switching, especially when you don't have a lineup like the Clippers who could just switch 1 through 5, I thought that was a good thing. I thought you're supposed, okay, they switch, okay, you now have a mismatch, go after that mismatch. It just seems kind of crazy. And to tie into that, if you're playing KPJ, Jalen Green, and Alperen Sengun, right? Those are the three guys that are going to need reps. How do you sprinkle in, especially if they're all starting? How do you sprinkle in, more looks for Jabari other than what he's been getting, which is largely just catch and shoot shots or hustle plays where he gets an offensive rebound and tries to make something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes it so tough, right? Because like you mentioned, like I mean, I don't disagree with Stephen Silas, but to me, that's also just like that's not a reason to not run it. Like, I need to see more than just him lifting in the corners. Like, actually try and like, I feel like they don't really use him as a screener that much. That's something I would like to see more of. Bringing him off just more complex actions, like okay, bring him off a zipper cut or something and pop him out to three, have him ghost, like just do anything with him as a shooter. Because it doesn't feel like they do it very much right now. It's often just him starting out in the corner and lifting as drives happen. It's pretty basic, like just running spread pick and roll without with really any weak side action going on. And right now, like I mean, I think what's difficult with like I think he was called a plug and play player pretty early on in the draft cycle, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I think for a Rockets team that is still like figuring out what their infrastructure is, he wasn't plug and play. Like he's not somebody like I wouldn't call him like a necessarily like a low fuel prospect, but he's somebody who I think is still figuring out how to be assertive without the ball in his hands. And I think that's been an issue, especially over the last week or two. Like his shots per game have like drastically dipped down. Like he's still taking a decent amount, but I think he went from like second most on the team across October to now he's taking like 8 to 10 a game in November, and that's just not enough. And again, I think part of it is just finding out how to pick his spots and whatnot. I do think there's probably a confidence factor to it too. But that's also like, all right, well, you got to run shit that he's used to doing. And sorry, I forgot to ask him all to cuss on here.
No, it's fine.
It's just human nature. But yeah, I mean, like, it's a really wonky balance in finding that. Because like you mentioned with like, all right, well, if he gets to switch, like, okay, have it scripted in. If you know that a team's going to switch all those actions, again, it's not like the most perfect mode of offense, but okay, they switch like a 1-4 pick and roll with Jabari, and Jabari has a guard on him. Tell him to fly down to the post. Like, okay, cool. We know this is going to happen. Like, either slip, see how it goes. Maybe you catch the ball and go on the roll, and you get going towards the rim. Obviously, finishing is an issue, but like I think just being 6'10" and going towards the rim is a plus, because then you're figuring out like, okay, he can work on finishing reps, and you're probably going to draw free throws too doing that. Or all right, you figure it out from there too. Like there's just, it feels like one thing happens in the offense and then it just kind of dies out. And again, like part of that is the players on the roster, but also part of that is just not being very inventive right now.
It's such a fascinating place that the Rockets are in with Stephen Silas because clearly this is a contract year. He's in year 3 of the 4-year deal. Next year is mostly non-guaranteed. So one way or another, they need to form a judgment of him by the end of the season because next year is when they're going to be actually trying to win. They have $60 million or up to that in cap space next off season. They also are no longer incentivized to bottom out because top 4 protected. They're going to lose their 2024 pick to OKC as part of the ill-fated Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook trade from back in the day. So there is going to be an organizational shift a year from now, and they need to figure out if Stephen is that guy. And from an X's and O's standpoint, schematically, all the things that you just laid out, Mark, are completely valid. And yet there's going to be some that point to just individual development. And the reality is that in terms of your most important young pieces, year 2 guys, Jalen Green, Alperen, Sengun, clearly they are better than they were a year ago. They are taking big strides. Jalen, it's been a bit mixed in terms of the pick and roll play, but I do think that's gotten better the last few games, season long. Really, the efficiency has been there with the exception of a 4-game road trip where he was really poor. He's looked really good the last few games, and that's helped the Rockets until the Clippers game at least be competitive with some quality opponents. Alperen, Sengun, I know the defensive limitations are there, and I know I'm cherry picking, but you can look at win shares per 48, and he's top 35 in the league. Do I think he's a top 35 player? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there are certain statistics where he grades out really, really well in some of the metrics. And so clearly those guys have taken a step forward. Jabari Smith Jr., he's not there yet, but let's say hypothetically that he can have a second half of the season similar to Jalen a year ago that gives you some decent hope to where certainly he's not going to make a rookie of the year run, but maybe he does something that leads you to think, hey, this is a first team all rookie guy that is capable of a year 2 breakout, like what we're hopefully seeing from Jalen right now. So I guess where I'm going with this, there's so many different lenses that you can judge Stephen Silas through. And schematically, in terms of X's and O's, is he optimizing this roster? I agree with you guys. It's pretty clearly no, at least right now. And there's some questionable rotation choices. And we'll see how things go throughout the season. Maybe there's a consolidation trade that can help him out. But then there's the other side, which is individual development. And some of these young guys clearly are getting better. I didn't even mention Usman Garuba, who's clearly shown some flashes over the past week and is much better in year 2 than year 1 when he struggled to make any impact, even when he was healthy. So, Mark, when you're looking at the NBA landscape as a whole and a coach like Silas that's in charge of so many young guys, how do you balance the schematic side versus, I guess, the individual development? Because say what you will about Stephen, a lot of these young guys are getting better. So on some level, there is some success for him to point to. I'm just not sure how exactly to contextualize that against the clear limitations in other areas.
Yeah, that's a really great point that I think is really tough because not that I was like trying to let them off easy, but I think a lot of this does come down to the front office too, like you're mentioning. And not even saying that it's a quote unquote bad thing, but I personally, like, when you just have a roster like that is this full of young players, it is so hard to ask somebody to come in and be like, all right, figure out how to make this better. Like, it was exactly like you mentioned, like, all right, well, I'd just be curious to know how they view their idea of what getting better is. I agree. Like, Jalen, I think, is improving. I think I don't know if it's necessarily a rate of improvement, because there are guys that are on the roster where I'm like, it's just like I can see the improvement, but it's just like the optimization. Like, I feel like you could see things be even better if there was like a little bit more of a focus on something. And but again, like, part of that is, all right, well, if you have a roster that's just like built pretty strictly on talent rather than optimizing talent, like, that makes it really hard for a coaching staff to make that work. So I think, yeah, I don't really have an answer on that one. That's the double-edged sword of kind of the way that Houston has set things up in their rebuild.
Paulo, I'll pose that same question to you, actually.
And I'm going to be way more negative, but
right.
Here we go. Because I'm kind of out on Silas as the coach. I think I'll transition this into a question later on, because I think there's a question to be had about this. But I think these players are so talented that to some extent, they are developing in spite of Silas in specific, because I can tell. But I think John Lucas done a great job in specific with players like in their individual development. But when it comes to head coaching responsibilities, like the rotations, like the way they're used on the floor, I actually think that some of these guys have developed in spite of Silas rather than because of him. We saw outrageous stuff like last season. They refused to experiment with Christian Wood and Sengun after refusing to trade them for so long, refusing to trade Christian for so long. And when they finally used them, Christian Wood was being used as the inside big, and now Alperen Sengun, a non-shooter, was being used to space out on the corner. Like simple enough. We see this season, there's clear chemistry between Jalen and Sengun. They play well off each other. That's one of the few bright spots on this team. And it took until last game for us to actually see its extended minutes. And that was when, when Jalen scored all of those points. We see, for some reason, on a team that is this bad, he's still, when the game's a blowout, he still takes out young guys to play Boban Marjanovic this year, or David Nuaba last year, or Daniel House. In garbage time, when you're already a bad team, you're going to be losing most of these games. Like, is there really a concept of garbage time when, you might be playing the other team's worst players, but you're not good enough to, just throw away those minutes. You should be, using them for something. The fact that he says that Jalen Green, the quote I think exactly says, he has to play one of Eric Gordon or Daishan Nix with Jalen Green because he needs a lead ball handler on the floor. Jalen Green is your blue chip prospect. He should be getting those reps when he gets the chance to. You shouldn't need to be babysat, or I don't know what the word is, by KPJ when he's on the floor, or by Nix or Eric Gordon, who I would argue are both worse playmakers than he is. And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I guess the question that I'll bring to you, and you can address what I said so far, but the other question I'll bring to you is, in your opinion, right, when does it start? Like, is there ever a world where you fire the coach mid-season? Because he's basically, or I think he's an expiring contract right now. You're lined up with the cap space and potentially like a top draft pick on a really good draft for next year. I mean, it's not the most, appealing head coaching position, but if you draft a Victor Wembanyama, I mean, I would guess that there's good coaches out there that would like to come coach a guy like that.
Especially because you have cap space to add in veterans.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, they do have 2 qualified interims. One of the big reasons you might not go that route for a lot of teams is that you're obviously not going to hire your next coach unless things go insanely well during the season. You're going to have an interim. Well, they do have 2 guys in John Lucas and Lionel Hollins that have prior head coaching experience and know what they're doing. So that might further tip the scales a little bit, is that there are 2 guys on that bench that have experience and some knowledge of how to run an NBA team.
And Coach Abdel Fattah from the G League as well, who they've been grooming in the G League. He was G League champion last year. My question becomes, when do you start considering that? And is that ever a thought? Since South has been here for 2 years and he has a system in place, and who knows, that could send the team into disarray even more. So how do you kind of address that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and not to like totally relitigate things, but I do think, I mean, just in general, I've not been inspired by Silas in any of his time in Houston, to be honest. Like, that's just being blunt in how it's gone. But I do think it is really just tough, considering he was hired to coach the next iteration of the Harden Rockets. Obviously, that changes, and it's just been a really weird couple years. But I mean, I was frankly surprised that he got brought back this year. I wasn't really of the opinion that they should have kept him last year. I know, it was just so funky because they had, early on in the year, it was they were 3-16, and I think it was the Haynes report that he was going to get fired. Or they were having discussions.
Jake Fisher. Yeah, they started 1-16. Right. Yep. And Fisher reported, I don't think that report was wrong. What happened is that they had that crazy 7-game winning streak that came out of nowhere right after that. So, a lot of people like to clown Fisher over that. I don't think it was wrong. I think that 7-game win streak sort of changed the equation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where it just, I don't know. To me, that's where it was funky because I was like, yeah, they had the win streak, but then after that, I felt like they were kind of right back to where they'd been at the beginning of the year. Obviously, not as bad as 1-16, but still, like it to me, there wasn't enough improvement to just be fully in. And granted, like they looked better after the trade deadline. I thought Jalen made real strides, but I think it's kind of like along what Paulo was saying too. Like, is this like actual development, or is this guy's just kind of thriving in spite of what's going on? And I think part of, like, I can't fully answer it because I'm not in Houston. I don't know stuff behind the scenes and how the team views Stephen Silas and the coaching in general. But yeah, I think like if it continues like this, I'm kind of down on it. Like, not that I think I mean, again, it's tough because like you mentioned, Powell, in terms of talking about garbage time. Like, I think it's good to pull guys and when you're down 20, because I just don't necessarily know what you're, not that you can't grow in. I think obviously it's dependent on situation, but if your starting lineup is getting shit canned, I do think that they should get pulled. Like, there has to be accountability, but also like, I think what I struggle with is how often this team has not been competitive in the fourth quarter this year. Like, I don't expect this team to go out and win games. I think my expectations this year were for this team to be like, yeah, I thought they would probably win like mid-20s games, maybe, but I expected them to be more competitive than they've been. And that's what's been frustrating for me because I think that they're capable of being more competitive. Like, they're talented enough to do it. And I think that's where I get more frustrated with the Silas stuff, because to me, like, I think you can be competitive if you have, like, I do think at times like effort has been an issue, especially on defense. Like, this team should be better than what they're 26th in defense right now.
Yeah.
So
they were better a couple of weeks ago, but it's fallen off.
Yeah, and it should be better than that. Not again, like, not that they have to be. It's not even about the rankings, but it's just like, you guys watch every single game. Like, it's the breakdowns are like pretty inexcusable sometimes. So it's just, yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I do think, like, if it continues like it has right now, I would definitely be considering making the change.
Yeah, and once again from a coaching perspective, you brought back the memories of that 1-16, and it just reminded me of a couple more of these things that are kind of mind-boggling. They went 1-16, and the problem was very clearly that they were playing Daniel Theis at the 4 with Jason Tate at the 3, and there was no spacing for 17 straight games. And Jalen Green's, if you go look at Jalen Green's shot chart, it's transition buckets and pull-up threes 2 steps behind the 3-point line because they're running dribble handoffs across the 3-point line, and everybody's going under them, and so the only thing they can do is exactly that, because nobody's respecting their back in the paint. I think what bothers me the most is a little bit of the philosophy of Silas when it comes to, it feels like he's trying to win games. There's 2 paths here. He's either trying to win games and being awful at it, or he's prioritizing development, and that makes some of the decisions a bit mind-boggling in sense of KJ Martin. You're a fellow KJ Martin enthusiast.
That is correct.
Year 1, he's someone who, towards the end of the year, he was playing some really good basketball. He was one of the team's most promising young players, still 19 or 20 at the time. And you start a new season, and all of a sudden David Nwaba and Daniel House are ahead of him in the pecking order, and you have to think, hey, this guy just performed really well. Where's the meritocracy to, he gets a place on the team. He wasn't playing at all. And this season, we're seeing, and we saw that a little bit with Sengun last year. And this season, in Josh Christopher, who had to really claw his way into the rotation. And this season, we're seeing the same thing with another player who I think is a favorite of yours, with Tari Eason.
Mm-hmm.
And my qualms with the garbage time stuff earlier on was because just this last game against the Clippers, in garbage time, they weren't playing Tari Eason, who, he played 15 minutes a game. He's easily one of the best performers whenever he gets minutes. And he's somehow still not a priority. I would say he's probably, if it were up to me, he's probably the 3rd or the 4th most important player on this team. When it comes to potential to actually become something in the NBA, and just he isn't treated like it. He gives his all 100% of the time. His main problem coming in is the 3-point shot real, Well, he's shooting, I think, above 40% from three, and he is still not getting, more. He's playing 18 minutes a night, which it's just he's shooting 43% from three, just to be specific. And so there's meritocracy. So, for example, when Eric Gordon's having a good game and the game's coming to an end, it's a close game, they go to Eric Gordon in the clutch because they're feeding the hot hand. And that's meritocracy, right? EG is playing well, he gets the shot. But then with the young guys, who are the ones who are supposed to experience this meritocracy, it doesn't happen anymore. If KPJ is having a bad game and Jalen Green's having a really good game and Tari Eason's having a really good game, it never happens that you give the ball to Jalen, perhaps play Jalen a pick and roll big and three wings out there. Or it never happens that Jalen, for example, 2 games ago, Jalen Green was really hot and the game was close. And once again, he completely vanishes in the fourth quarter and the ball doesn't go to him when the game against the Pelicans. That kind of philosophy thing is more of what bothers me, combined with the fact that he's just not optimizing, what these lineups look like. And it feels like, and I don't know if you got this, early on last season, I don't know how much Rockets basketball you watched, it felt like we were seeing him try to recreate what he was doing in Dallas, in Houston, and fitting squared pegs into round holes, or the other way around. I never know. And so we saw Jalen Green was basically playing like Tim Hardaway Jr. He was getting stuck in the corner. He's like a wing player, doesn't get any ball handling duties pretty much. It's either coming off screens or just spotting up. And then Christian Wood is the Kristaps Porzingis of Dallas, and then he's kind of shoving Kevin Porter Jr. into the Luka role, which just doesn't work at all because it's not close to playmaking, right? And there's various cases of him doing this early last season, and it didn't work. And a lot of people complained, "Hey, let's fit the system to the players, not try to fit the players into the system when they clearly don't have the ability to do so." And this season, it just feels like it's not as much of that. I don't feel as much that he's trying to get players to play to something that's not their strengths to some extent. But it just feels like, well, his bread and butter got taken away, and now he doesn't really know what to do with with these players, and it's just, I don't know if it depends on how confident they are in the assistant coaches, but it's tough to fire a guy on a rebuilding team because these guys need structure, and Silas doesn't provide a lot of structure, but it's probably still better than no structure at all. And it's just tough. I guess I'll transition into a more positive topic. We've got on the Rockets roster right now, we've got Tari Eason, we've got KJ Martin, we've got Jason Tate, and we've got Eric Gordon and Jabari Smith, right? These guys haven't been all healthy at the same time, so we haven't gotten to see this yet. But if it were up to you, how would you, spread playing time across these 5 guys who, as long as Eric Gordon's here, he's going to have to play. So how do you deal with that? And just some thoughts you might have on, we know how fond you are of KJ, and I know Tari Eason is also someone who's on your radar.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Like, I think, what's tough too, KJ has been pretty good for me this year. Like, I think obviously the shot has been a little bit hit or miss. I think he's still kind of finding his way with that. But he does good things. I still think his perimeter defense hasn't been awesome. He does good things rotationally still. But when you're looking at everything, I think you have to have Jabari 1 for me. Eric Gordon, I still think I just need to see them make the EG trade. Unless he's really, I've heard that he's a good locker room guy. I'd imagine he is if they've kept him around as long as they have. But I do think it's kind of at the point where they need a different veteran around than Eric Gordon for actual on-court development. He does good things, but in terms of the actual on-court stuff, I don't think that he's super beneficial to the guys around him. Which maybe that's a little bit unfair, but that's where I would go, especially with I would so much rather see Josh Christopher play. To me, that's been my least favorite thing about the team this year has been like, and again, I don't know if there's maybe Jacob had like a really bad training camp. But based on what he did last year, like, no, was he super consistent? I wouldn't say that he was, but especially during the stretch of play when he got to start last year and just in general, like that's a very useful player and a guy who I think should be playing for this team. Like there were times where I think, especially with Jay Sean out, like you could say that Jacob was their best perimeter defender at times last year. And I don't think that's going to be the same this year, but yeah, like it's just there's too many guys sometimes. But like same with what you said with Tari. I think it is tough because his decision making is like all over the place. He can make really positive plays happen, but then can turn around and do like he's gonna have one of the worst floater attempts you've ever seen. Like I think the best Tari descriptor I have. There was a game against Texas A&M last year when he had like perfect lateral slides, strip and steal against, I think it was against, I can't remember the guy's name right now, but the guy who ended up getting drafted from Texas A&M or going undrafted but signed two-way with, I think, Washington. But then he came down the court and threw up a floater from like the free throw line that went over the backboard. And I was like, that's kind of the Tari experience right now. Like, I think figuring out like rating that stuff in. And I know like for me, I would rather see him get to play through some of his mistakes, but I do understand like some of the coaching perspective on like he makes some plays that can be like really frustrating. And I know that was like a really roundabout way of talking about it, but like I think to me, Eric is like just on the bottom of the list with that, and I'm ready to see that trade happen. But also at the same time, I think that there kind of has to be a trade to bring in another veteran. Like, and that's probably moving off of one of the young guys, if we're being honest. Like if they're this low on Jacob, like I think that they just need to make the trade. Like I don't really know that you can do anything to bring value back, and I think that's part of what they tried to do last year with, like you mentioned, like playing house and just like the older guys ahead of KJ, which I hated. I didn't like that at all. I don't think it was warranted because they weren't better than him. They didn't show more than what KJ did the year before. But okay, if that's what you're going to do, then do it and make it happen. So I mean, I view it kind of the same way this year. Like, all right, if you are putting Jacob behind because you don't think he's ready, then okay, probably move on from him. Get somebody in here who can help you. I know like that seems early for some people. Like I'm a big Jacob believer. I'm more just like if that's what they're seeing, that's what they believe. It's a really weird place right now. And again, I'm not trying to make it negative, but it's just like it's been confusing.
No, understood. I can say that with Josh, I've poked around on that a little bit. I think part of it goes back to summer league. He's been a bit too aggressive on ball for their liking. I think they'd like for him to accept a bit more 3-and-D type role as opposed to, a dominant on-ball creator. They think he's trying to do a bit too much. At least going back to summer league, I do think that the last couple of games he's shown some good sides. At least against the Clippers, I thought he had some good possessions. So hopefully he's sort of turning a new leaf. I think some of it comes down to their usage of him, just basically wanting him to adopt a different role than he has to this point. But yeah, at some point you need to play him because Paulo's made this point before. Look, these year two guys, you need to have some idea of what you have in those guys by next summer in all the cap room, because conceivably you're going to use cap room to fill roles that could otherwise go to some of your young guys. So you need to have a better idea at the end of this year than when you started on what the upside of these guys actually is and whether they can play, whether they can fit in. And again, it's tough to do that if they're not actually playing rotation minutes. So I get there with you. I understand some of the concerns in terms of getting him to buy into the right role, but some of that also comes down to usage and coaching and putting him in the right situation. Anyway, the last question that I've got for you, Mark, and then I'll turn things over to Paulo if he's got anything else. We've talked a lot on this show about the various issues that need to be improved one way or another. And in fairness to Stephen, the schedule has not been friendly. They started with 10 of 13 on the road, a lot of them against contenders. That's absolutely brutal for a young team. They're about to have a 4-game homestand. Then they have a brief road trip. And then in December, they actually have a 7-game homestand, extremely long by NBA standards, leading up to Christmas. So to me, there's sort of like a natural timetable. You let the schedule even out a little bit. You get them more games at home, which typically young teams benefit from. We know they had the 7-game win streak a year ago around the same time frame, late November, early December. And to me, if you get to the other side of this extended home stretch and you still haven't seen progress on some of these fronts, to me, that might be the point that you have to seriously consider doing something in season. I don't believe in doing it literally right this second, but I think letting the schedule balance out a little bit, at least from my view, that's probably the best way to sort of balance out giving Stephen every opportunity versus trying to use something from this season productively if it continues on the path that it's on. So I'm sort of looking at like late December, early January, if things haven't materially improved, as that being sort of the window for a move. Where do you come down on that?
No, I think that's a fair point. Unless like something like drastic happens before then. But yeah, I agree. Like I think, okay, let's see how it balances out because their schedule has been pretty difficult. And again, it's less about the winning to me. It's more like, okay, competitiveness and
Right.
just seeing what it looks like.
Right.
But yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think that that's a good line of thinking because you'd never want to be like too rash or harsh with something too.
So that can affect your reputation when you're trying to hire the next coach.
Yeah.
Certainly other coaches around the league will look at that stuff and say, well, they didn't give Stephen Silas a fair shake, even given all the circumstances that he had nothing to do with when he took the job in October 2020. So you do have to be delicate with that, I think. And if this continues for a bit longer, I know it's frustrating, but even if you wait until late December, early January, you would still have basically half the season left. That's a lot of time to potentially make progress. And I agree with you. It's not about the wins and losses. It's about materially seeing progress in terms of how they function as a unit and or making sure that the effort stays consistent. Because one thing that I'm looking out for with a team and a season that starts like this, sometimes you can see around the 20-game mark, a lot of guys just to sort of go to slumped shoulders. We saw Eric Gordon tweet out that angry face emoji last night, and he had some post-game quotes about,
Hey, don't forget about Eric Gordon coming after Paulo. That was a good time.
That's the only reason
God.
I want him traded. It's
What's
personal
so
now,
funny, man. Yeah, what's so effing funny? But yeah, like you're already seeing that. And he had like the post-game quote last night about the winning mentality, which is sort of a veiled shot. And of course, he's the veteran. It makes sense that, a veteran in this situation might check out mentally a bit before the younger guys. But I think especially if it starts to transition to the younger guys, to where the guys you're trying to develop aren't going on the court with the right attitude and are basically expecting bad things to happen, then at that point you might have to act even more proactively. So that's just sort of the way I look at the timetable. I think barring something absolutely insane, I think closer to the Christmas, New Year's timeframe is when you can have a more real evaluation of where things are going. And Paulo, I'll turn things over to you to close this out.
Yeah, I'll close on a brighter note. It's way too early, right? I know people aren't trying to hear this yet, but I'll close off with, we've talked about all that it is wrong. We know they have a lot of cap space next year. We've touched on this team needs a lead ball handler, right? And something that's been, sparking up a little bit on Rockets Twitter is there ever a world where if you get the number 1 pick, that you either trade down and take Scoot because you need a guy like Scoot very, very badly? Or do you just take Wemby and you dream about Jalen Green and Wemby pick and roll for the rest of the summer? Do you even consider going for Scoot Henderson here?
Man, that's a good question. I think some people would scoff at me for saying that I would consider it. But I do think, I don't know, maybe this is because I've veered too much into talking to people who work for front offices and scouts and executives. And like, I do think that so often the importance of fit and development and who a player becomes is undersold. Because like, okay, cool. Well, Wemby could be, Wemby is an incredible prospect, but like if he goes somewhere that is not going to be great at getting him the touches in the spots that are best for him, then I think it could look tough. Like just for example, like I think Benedict Mathurin has blown a lot of people away this year, including me. But part of that too has been like Indiana's had a very concrete plan for what they wanted to do with him. They sought him out. They run a lot of the same stuff that he was used in and at Arizona, and they've heightened that as well. They've played out with more pace and in transition to really get the most out of him. And I think if you don't have teams that are willing to sell out to completely get the most out of who you are as a player and develop the most that they can get out of you, I think that makes it tough. So like for me, with how the team is built, I mean, granted, I don't think Houston probably ends up with the first overall pick, but if they do, like, I don't think it's crazy to take Scoot. Like, Scoot is an incredible prospect. I think it's, I think most people are always going to end up leaning Wemby. I don't think it would be all that crazy to take Scoot if you end up getting the first pick. But if you can trade down to 2, like, shit, I wouldn't. I mean, if you would, depending on what you get back to, like, yeah. I mean, I think it's always on the table. It depends on where you're at. I think I would still have Wemby rated over Scoot as a prospect, but I just don't. I mean, maybe Houston would be like, well, we could just draft Wemby and then figure it out after. But I tend to just be more of the go get your guy and go from there.
I think those are some very good points. And just me personally about the Scoot stuff, I've been considering it because it's just so rare, and we've, as Rockets fans, grown to realize this more and more through this rebuild. It's just so rare to have someone who's naturally gifted as a playmaker, as Scoot Henderson was, that already plays at his own pace. We've been trying to get KPJ to do that, and it seems like it's such a big step, right? There's guys that are naturally gifted at scoring, and that they eventually learn to play make a little bit out of that scoring, just so they aren't tunnel visioned all the time. Very rarely do you have the guy that's a natural playmaker with the tools and the scoring that Scoot already has. I mean, he had, I think, 16 assists in his last Ignite game, something completely crazy like that. And with a guy like Jalen Green, with a guy like Jabari Smith as your, foundational guys, 2 guys that are really good off the ball, you've got to consider it. Although at the same time, Jalen last 3 games had 6 assists on every single one of them and looked a lot better, as that lead ball handler. So it's also interesting because a guard and a big combo is we've seen it with. We haven't seen it much, but I was really excited to watch Harden and Embiid as the kind of shooting guard center combo where they're both so good. How do you guard both? It's really tough, but I'm not gonna fire out the hot take. I'll just say that I would consider it.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. I'm sure you will get very bad replies if you tweet that out.
But I do like ending on that because let's just dream about the Rockets having the number 1 pick. That would be. I mean, I know even if you're the worst team, you have a 14% chance in the revised lottery. So the odds are certainly against you. But yeah, let's dream about that scenario, because I would be perfectly fine even if you got ratioed into oblivion for suggesting it. Look, it's way better than the alternative of not being in the position to make that call in the first place. A lot of people, and of course, I'm not comparing 2022 to 2023 because the top tier of this year's draft just nowhere near as strong as next year's. But yeah, there were a lot of people that would have said, if you mentioned in early June that Orlando should take Paulo, would have said, wow, that's blasphemous. And they did. And not saying he's going to be better than Jabari. I'm not jumping to that conclusion, but at least to this point, it certainly looks defensible for Orlando to do what they did. And so I do think that certainly speaks to the idea that you can at least question the conventional wisdom, even if people on social media aren't ready to hear it at that particular time. Anyway, that's where we will wrap things for today. I want to thank Mark Schindler for taking the time to join us. You can read his work on Dime as far as NBA coverage. He has great stuff on, the Rockets, but all sorts of young teams when it comes to following the draft and recently drafted guys, the scouting process, that side of the business. Again, follow him at MG_Schindler on Twitter. That's SCHINDLER. And you can read his work in Dime. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. And this is where we'll break for today. For me, I'm Ben DuBose. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben DuBose. I write for the Rockets Wire, USA Today's blog covering the Houston Rockets. You can read my work at rocketswire.usatoday.com, or again, follow me on Twitter at Ben DuBose or the Rockets Wire. That's the handle for Rockets Wire. Also, Paulo, you can follow him on Twitter at Paulo Alves NBA. And this show, The Lager Line, served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. Follow them on Twitter at The Lager Line. We also have a link tree there where you can find this and all of our other podcasts Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you want to listen. You can find it on our link tree. And the easiest way to get to our link tree is by going to the Logger Line on Twitter. Final plug I want to throw out, Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of the Houston Rockets. They're a sponsor of this program as well. You can listen to this episode at sports790.com. Check out all their other programming there as well. You should also follow them at Sports Talk 790 on Twitter. With that, we will break. For Mark and Paulo, I'm Ben. Thanks as always to you guys for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line.